back to our final segment of our Caranine Hour as we continue our conversation with, at the end of the last segment, we were looking at this whole question of, I had raised the question of the young adults, and you talk about the carryover of the issues and concerns from earlier, and how in some instances they become magnified because of additional pressures. Correct. And again, I just wanted to mention the importance of the sense of well-being, because when people are conscious of it in their own lives, it makes such a difference to the way in which they approach life. And I think there are so many instances of this lack of well-being. And sometimes people aren't aware of what it is that they're lacking. And I just wondered, you mentioned earlier your experience with the Crisis Center. Could you just say something about what you've learned by being involved in that area of work?
Okay, and so just to give a little bit of history, the Crisis Center for, I do believe, about 30 years now has provided emotional and counseling support for Bahamians of all walks of life. There's no charge, and my experience there has been developing, implementing, coordinating programs along with other clinicians to raise awareness and sensitize youth to gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, and how to healthily manage emotion and behavior, because we find that a lot of what is happening is not necessarily not wanting to make improvements within one's life, but not knowing how to. And so it's partly, my experience there was partly education, helping to coordinate trainings for youth advocates to go into schools and speak to children, junior, senior students as to what's going on within the community and how we could better assist them in managing some of these problem areas in their lives. And so that was the focus of mine there. And similar, in addition, I also provided counseling support to children of various ages, adolescents, and at times adult counseling as well. So that was my experience. And in being there, it just really paints the picture of the span of challenges that we experience as a people. And these are just people who are brave enough to go in and speak to these issues and say, I may need help. But there's so many more who will never pick up a phone or ask for help. And so we have to commend organizations like the Crisis Center.
And you believe that it is making a significant contribution to the well-being in the society? Yes,
just to have somewhere to go and trained, and I emphasize that, trained clinicians to speak to you and help you to navigate and establish treatment and plans for recovering from whatever it may be. You know, there are a myriad of issues that people seek support for, so we have to...
And it is free of charge, available to...
The Crisis Center.
All who may come.
Non-profit, correct.
And have you had any dealings with guidance counselors in the schools?
In my work with the Respect Now program, which I spoke about briefly, we spoke and worked with the guidance counselors, firstly, you know, to make them aware as to what our intentions were, because it's challenging going into a new environment. Right, but it was important for us to get their permission, make them aware as to what we were there to do, and to work in partnership with them during this limited time frame, but I think a very important time frame that was afforded to us. We were allotted time during the family life sessions to go in and carry on this program for about 6 to 8 weeks, and then the program revived at one point. And I do know that the Crisis Center currently has mental health professionals who continue to go out and do outreach and trainings of sort to shed light on what's going on.
I mentioned the guidance counselors because it does seem to me that that's a group that needs a wider support from the community.
They do need
because of the challenges that they have to face.
They have tremendous challenges, and unfortunately, because the culture of school and what's happening within our school is issues surrounding violence, having to manage the behavior in a classroom as opposed to content delivery. So many persons are not able to do what they are hired to do because they have so many other pressing issues, leaving not only them at times feeling discouraged, but also for many students who may not be a part of this chaos, to feeling discouraged about their own experiences as students. So I think we have to look at this holistically and ask ourselves, how can each of us make a difference in supporting our youth, in making resources available, and doing our part to educate as to how we could, as we speak to it now, have improved quality of life and well-being.
That's the ultimate goal.
The ultimate goal.
In terms of improving the quality of life that people experience. Unfortunately, that quality is seriously challenged by the economic conditions that so many family units face, that the sheer lack of basic necessities creates a situation that is the opposite of the pursuit of wellness. For some people, it's just a sheer matter of survival.
And we see that more now than ever. We talk about, as human beings, the end goal in mind, to be actualized and fulfilled. But that is not a priority because many people day-to-day responsibilities, managing a home, having to figure out how to pay bills, how to feed children, how to find a job if unemployed. These are real issues, and there is a kind of burgeoning helplessness and hopelessness that pervades many communities and homes, and it really speaks to us having to build community among ourselves, because these feelings that people are having and this pain that people are feeling, it's more common than we think.
Far more so, and this experience of hopelessness that so many people are dealing with in the here and now, that seems to be growing. And because the society is becoming more and more sort of negative, it does seem to me. And there's this lack of trust. I mean, hardly any people don't trust anyone. By and large, this is sort of a very negative approach to trust. And skepticism is growing all over the place. Especially, I think in the young, late teenage, early 20s, it seems to me that skepticism is far too high. But a lot of it is brought about by the social and economic situation that they're having to cope with on a daily basis. And people who have, it seems to me, the middle class and upper middle class people aren't, I think most of them are not aware of the pain and agony that a lot of people are experiencing. And there are some who are aware, sort of put themselves in these safe areas, gated communities, etc., so they're protected in a sense, or they believe they're protected from these forces that are at work. But if we are to have wellness and a good quality of life for the whole community, there is only a question of time before these safe communities will not be so safe. Not that I wish violence to occur, but if the pressures are not reduced, eventually, the bottle will blow or explode of some kind, if it is unaddressed. So that's why I believe that it's incumbent, even in the school settings, to have more guidance counselors, not less, more people working in the human community to increase the level of support and help people to have a better understanding of who they are and where they're headed. But if we don't have that kind of work going on in the community, then we can't talk about quality of life, because it just will not be there. And what worries me is this one, lack of awareness by so many people, and what is worse, the awareness of those who have and who seek to isolate themselves from the wider society. And both, to me, are signs of a society that is running away from this wellness that we're looking for, this higher quality of life. So in your experience in terms of dealing with psychology, what would you say to, I would say to the young people in particular, in terms of how to cope with the realities that we are presently faced with?
That is a loaded question. Because,
Pass loaded. It is one that is.
In this field, to offer effective support and service to people, it really requires you to assess that person, what's going on, also to build a rapport, and I think that's what's lacking. Many persons aren't taking the time to build relationships with younger persons because people themselves are dealing with so much. And so the idea of making the time to sit down, to ask the basic questions such as, how are you? What are you thinking? How are you feeling? How can I support you? Or what is going on with you? It is not uncommon for families to not sit down and have conversation. And we see this throughout our society. And home is really the first place where security is built. It is really the primary structure from which you learn to function in larger society. And so I do think we need to rethink how we go about socializing in our homes, where we're putting our focus, and also to reconsidering the language that we use with young people, because it is not uncommon to hear things such along the lines of, young people don't have issues, you don't have bills to pay, you're not an adult yet, you haven't lived yet, and so your issues aren't real issues, or they don't matter. And when you do that, you're doing a disservice, because you're creating a disconnect, you're widening the divide, and when those issues do manifest, you are not going to be the person that child or that individual seeks help from, because they feel dismissed. And so I think it goes back to learning how to communicate is really an integral part of this dissocialization process that we have. Many of us aren't communicating. And two, we have to look at the implication of social media and how that is too affecting how people parent, how people function in the workplace, and among people. For the most part, people are always glued to their phones, and they think what they're doing is connecting, but what they don't realize is simultaneously they're diminishing their ability to really communicate and what communication means.
And they are, in terms of the whole social media project at present, it's so diverse, with so many persons contributing to it, and very often without much thought going into what's happening, it ceased to be of any help. In fact, it is more of a hindrance than a help in building a society. And then there's so many negative factors in the social media at present. The desire to be sensational and make up things, that's good. All of that. As it brings excitement for some people, but it really does not help to build community, and certainly does not help people to enjoy a better quality of life.
You made some real hard-hitting points. Social media, as we know, it does have its advantages in terms of access to information and just making the world smaller. But when we evaluate what is happening in terms of the impact of social media and its relationship to mental health, what we see is a lot of children who are developing without the fundamental social skills. So what is empathy? How do I understand what somebody is going through? What are turn-taking skills? When do I listen? When do I speak? It also has kind of cultivated a sense of entitlement for many people. This environment of immediacy. So I want what I want now. And if I don't get that, then problems are to come about. Similarly, studies are showing a greater connection between frequent use of social media or preoccupation with social media and the development of certain mental illnesses. So we talk about the depression generation. A lot of people, a lot of youth are presenting with, if not criteria for depression, signs of depression, because in navigating these platforms, there's a comparison that takes place. And so there are feelings of inadequacy and I'm not good enough, or why does this person appear to be living this way and experiencing the best of life, not recognizing it's all crafted. So, you know, there is a real correlation between social media use, preoccupation with social media, and signs of mental health issues or concerns that are real. And we're seeing it a lot sooner. Persons who are younger.
It is writ large now across the society. Well, thank you very much for coming. We run out of time, but
Thank you for
you
having me.
You have to come back so that we can continue our discussion.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you for helping us to come to grips with what's going on in the society and the opportunities that are available for persons to get help. So continue on your journey and hopefully impact the people with whom you come into contact.
Thank you so much.
So our viewers, we say good night and God bless.